Hey guys, welcome back to Pete the Surfaroo. Exceptional story here today, exceptional Australian. This story is about this guy, World War II, 2 planes flying, 1 plane gets shot down, and there's a whole story about that, but even what happens after this is even bigger and better. Let's go meet the man, Mr. Bill Pearce, and he'll tell us all about it. Let's go. Woo. Well, here we are, Mr. Bill Pearce. How are you, mate?
Oh, I'm fine.
Mate, it's a great honour to be here with you today, and of course a lot of stuff went down there in World War II.
Yes, quite a lot of stuff, yes.
Now, mate, tell us a bit about how you sort of got involved in the war and what happened to the lead up to this exciting, pretty devastating sort of crash and years later.
Yeah, well, briefly, I joined the Air Force in May 1942. I was trained as a wireless operator air gunner. I did some training in Australia, was posted to England, finished my training there, and finished up flying in Lancaster bombers with Bomber Command. I joined the Air Force, the Royal Australian Air Force, in May 1942. I was trained as a wireless operator air gunner, did some training in Australia, was posted to England, finished my training there, and then was posted to the Royal Air Force's Bomber Command, where I flew in Lancaster bombers. Well, firstly I flew with 100 Squadron. It was based in Lincolnshire. It was a main force squadron, and I'd already joined the crew then. The Lancaster carried a crew of 7 men. We did 12 operational flights with 100 Squadron, and we then transferred to the Pathfinder Force. Pathfinder Force was a specialist unit in Bomber Command. Our job was to find the aiming point in the target area, and we would drop coloured flares, usually reds and greens, on the target aiming point. Then main force can then come along and bomb on our flares. The idea of this was to concentrate the bombing, and to do this we had specialist navigators. We carried 2 navigators instead of the usual 1 in the Lancaster crew, and they were very skilled actually. We did this successfully in all sorts of targets in Germany, places like Essen, Munich, Karlsruhe, Frankfurt, Nuremberg, Munich, and many others, and we successfully completed 41 bombing flights, but on the 42nd our luck ran out. On this one we were on a target, an oil refinery at a place called Riesholz, which was on the southeast outskirts of Dusseldorf. And we were running up onto the target area at about 10 minutes past 1 in the morning of the 21st of February 1945 when we were shot down. I was later to find out that we'd been hit by a burst of 20mm cannon fire fired by a Messerschmitt 110 Luftwaffe night fighter. The cannon shells took the rear turret, killed my rear gunner, and then took the starboard inner engine, which just exploded and burst into flame, and we had no option but to get out of the aircraft. The skipper told us on the intercom, ordered us to bail out, and he didn't have to tell me twice. So I got out very quickly. We were about 18,000 feet when we were hit. That's at oxygen height, and to move we had to take the oxygen mask off, because it's to a fixed point. Anyhow, I did that, but immediately started to suffer from the effects of lack of oxygen. And I think the simplest way I can describe that now is being happy drunk. If you stay there, of course, you'll just pass out, and that's the end of it. I had this happen to me once in training in a recompression chamber, but that's another story. Anyhow, I bailed out successfully and drifted down in the middle of the night, of course, couldn't see the ground till I hit it, and I found out too late that I was drifting slightly sidewards, and as the chute collapsed, it pulled me over onto my left shoulder and injured it pretty badly.
How young were you when you went to war?
Well, I was 6 months off my 19th birthday when I joined up, and I was there for roughly 3.5 years, because I was 2 months from my 22nd birthday when I was discharged. The Lancaster, in its day, it was a beautiful aeroplane, no doubt about it. Its bomb load, it could carry anything up to, the normal main force bomb load was about 10,000 pounds. It was the cookie, we called it. It was the 4,000 pound blockbuster. Cookie in clusters. The blockbuster to knock it down, and the clusters of 5 pound incendiaries to burn it all up, sort of thing. But other than that, we could carry high explosive bombs, 1,000 pounders or 500 pounders to make up the load.
Sure.
And when we got Pathfinder Force, we only carried the flares and high explosive. We didn't carry incendiaries because we didn't want them burning and obliterating the flares.
Well, we've got one here actually, haven't we? Of Lancaster, the plane that you were flying in?
Yes, we have.
Yeah, let's have a look at it.
Well, this is
just for those viewers out there to
this
see.
is actually a replica of my aeroplane. It's got our aeroplane squadron marking GTQ Queen, and it's exactly a replica. This blimp underneath, that often gets mistaken for a underbelly gun emplacement, but isn't. It's the radar scanner for our navigational radar. And my position was just below that Astrodome.
Okay.
On the port side.
So you were actually in charge of?
I was in charge of radio set and what I call it, an aircraft detection device, a radar device called Fish Pond.
That's good.
Yeah.
Now, Bill, we've got a model of Walter's plane too. Can you hold it up for us and just show the viewers? And of course, in those days, it was quite a unique sort of plane, very fast. And tell me about it.
Yeah, well, this is an exact copy of Walter's plane. It's got his squadron markings on it too, as it was a CC. But it is a Messerschmitt 110, a twin-engine aeroplane, beautiful aeroplane, but it had a very deadly armament. These two little gadgets sticking up here represent two 20mm cannon, and they were fired from drums that held 60 rounds, so Walter told me. And on the front here,
yes,
that's their Airborne Radar. Now the way they operated, firstly their long-range radar would pick up the bomber command, bomber stream as it will more or less will cross the coast of Europe.
Yep.
That was the long-range one. As we got further in, they had more efficient, shorter-range radar. It would pick us up, and by that time we were sort of on a course to go somewhere so they could follow us, and they would eventually direct the night fighter aircraft to the bomber stream. Well, once these Luftwaffe night fighters got in the bomber stream, they would lock onto an aeroplane, a bomber, on their own radar, and they could home right in on the bomber. But the final attack with this armament was always visual. And I know because I've got a report of the captain of the aircraft that shot us down. That was Captain Adolf Breeze. And in his report he says where he positioned himself 60 metres below my Lancaster. And that's pretty close.
It's close, yeah.
But it was always visual. Anyhow, when he fired, it took the rear turret of my aeroplane.
Yep.
And then come out to the wing, not on this one, but onto the wing on the starboard side, and took the starboard inner engine, which just exploded, and it's in the wing there with petrol tanks all around it, so we just had to get out. But this was a very efficient and very deadly piece of equipment, really. Yeah.
So back then, in that time, do you rate this as one of the most dangerous planes up in the sky?
Well, it was, yeah. For a long while, yeah. Well, this aeroplane, it was a very efficient machine, really, with its 20mm cannon, upward firing, and its airborne radar. The final attack was always visual. According to Hopman Bree's report, he got as close as 60 metres to my aircraft before he fired. And when he did, he took the rear turret out and hit the starboard inner engine, which just burst into flames, and was out there in wings in amongst petrol tanks. It burnt rather fiercely, and we just had to get out. Well, this one was taken in July 2008, when I made a visit to National War Memorial in Canberra. This is a photo of the wireless operator's position in a Lancaster aircraft. You can see he's got his hand on the Morse code key, and the dial, the low dial in front of him is the receiver, the one above is the transmitter.
Now, Bill, this is going to be a bit hard for you to explain, but what's the feeling like being shot and knowing there's no escape but to go down, and what's in store for you?
Yeah. Well, instantly, when I heard the thing hit, it made a horrible noise. I knew instantly what it was. My stomach seemed to drop to my boots, which it did. But the skipper immediately says, "Bail out, chaps." So I reached down to my parachute pack, which was on the floor beside me. I ripped my helmet and oxygen mask off, because we were at 18,000 feet, we were on oxygen. We used oxygen at night time from the ground up, and only way to go because it's to a fixed point, so you just get rid of the whole lot. But immediately I started to feel the effects of lack of oxygen, and or in the short term, I suppose I can best explain that as being happy drunk. And I've experienced the same thing in a recompression chamber in training, but that's another story. Anyway, I then climbed over the rear spar, which was part of the wing, held the wing together. It was just behind my position. It was about 2 feet high. I sat on it, fumbled and clipped the chute onto my chest, and then had a happy thought, oh well, I better get moving. So I found my way down to the rear door, which was my exit point. It was the rear of the fuselage and the starboard side, only about 4 or 5 feet forward of the tailplane. Anyhow, I knelt over the door sill, looked at the fire in the wing, and I can remember thinking, oh gee, that's burning a bit, isn't it? I stuck my head out a bit further, and whoosh, the slipstream just tore me out. Wow. So I can still remember tumbling head over heels in space, and I had another happy thought. Oh, I better pull it. And I'm not kidding, that's what I thought. I still remember it. I pulled it, and then I'm hanging there. But that's when I got a real fright. I could hear the sound of aircraft engines all around me. And I thought, oh my God, I'm in the middle of the bomber stream. If one of them hits me, I'm in real trouble. But naturally it did. I'd fallen through them. They just faded into the distance. But it was in the middle of the night, about 1:10 in the morning actually. It was a dark night. I didn't see the ground till I hit it. I didn't realise until too late that I was drifting in slightly sideways. As I hit the ground, the chute collapsed and pulled me over onto my left shoulder, and that's when it damaged it pretty badly. Anyhow, I managed to get rid of the parachute harness, the Mae West underneath it. I was lucky. I landed in the middle of an open, well, I call it a field. They don't have paddocks over there. In an open field, I found my way to a hedge at the edge of this, stuffed the harness and the Mae West into that, and then thought, well, what do I do next? And I knew that the Allied lines were a long way away to the wall, virtually the northwest. I thought, well, all I can do is start walking that way, because I had a compass in a little escape pack that we had with everything, little tiny compass. I mean, I knew I couldn't probably make it there. First thing I'd had to do, I'd have had to cross the Rhine anyway. It was between me and them. Anyway, what I did for the next 5 days and nights, I hid up wherever I could find cover during the day, moved at night, had quite a few, well, what will I say, exciting incidents in that time. It don't take too much time to relate. But I ended up getting mixed up in the outskirts of Cologne after one of my nights of travelling. I'm getting a bit hungry at this time, of course, and with the shoulder I was cold, wet, miserable, unhappy, and I just flopped down in what I'd call here a suburban paddock. No great trees or anything, just a few shrubs here and there, and I just flopped down in some of them and went to sleep. Anyway, it would have been about mid-morning. I was woken up by someone shaking me. And I looked up and I saw a man standing, an elderly man standing over me, and he just looked at me and hooked a finger and said, "Come." No way in the world I could have done anything else. So I went with him. He walked me in then further into Cologne, and luckily we met up with 3 Luftwaffe troops. He handed me over to them. They walked me in further into Cologne. Lucky I was with them because we passed a group of half a dozen civilians, men, all elderly of course, anybody young was on the Russian front sort of thing. And one of them was carrying on and pointing at me and really carrying on. And I knew what he was on about. He wanted me hanging up from the nearest lamppost, and that used to happen because Bomber Command was not popular with the German population at that time of the war. We were the Terrorfliegers of Bomber Command. Anyway, they got me into a Luftwaffe barracks in Cologne, and from there I went through, well, the POW channels, firstly to an interrogation centre they had for captured RAF aircrew. I was in solitary confinement there for a week, then moved out to the POW camps. Firstly I went to, what was it, Stalag 7A near Nuremberg, and as the war approached on the ground, we could hear it coming, we could hear the heavy artillery firing over us. They marched us out. We marched for 19 days to another camp, 13D, down at Moosburg, which was near Munich. We had an exciting happening. We'd been on that march about 2 or 3 hours. A long column of us, walking 3 abreast on backcountry roads, and we were strafed by 4 American Thunderbolt fighters. And they're on our side. They call this friendly fire, but it can kill you just as dead and hurt you just as much as the enemy ordnance. Anyway, they hit the head of the column and killed 4 and wounded about 20. But oh boy, did I move off that road, I'll say, like a very, very startled rabbit, and died behind the first big tree I came to. Anyhow, we ended up getting to Moosburg, and I spent the last 3 months of the war in Moosburg, and eventually liberated by General Patton, American General Patton's tanks, and flown back to England, and was taken to Brighton, which was the where the RAAF had taken over 2 hotels for the duration of the war as a reception centre. There I was re-equipped with uniforms, had a decent meal and a nice hot bath, and had some leave. Eventually came home on the British troop ship, the Orion, and came back to, landed back in Sydney, trained to Brisbane, had 2 weeks off and went back to work. Now that's very briefly the time in the Air Force, but it went on after that. We used to get letters from researchers in England and Holland and Germany. They were researching, the letters would say, "I'm researching a certain section of World War II. If you were involved in it, let us know." And I responded about half a dozen of them, and each time I've presented the story of what happened when I was shot down. And it's appeared in about 4 or 5 books now. And one of these researchers eventually wrote me a letter and explained that he had researched and found the actual crew that shot down my Lancaster. In the end, that turned out to be easy because the raid we were on was a secondary raid for the night. The main raid was on Dortmund with a few hundred aircraft on it, but my raid on Riesholz, it was only carried out by 6 Lancasters from my squadron to do the marking and drop the flares, and 165 Halifax aircraft. Well, on that raid, 5 were lost, 4 Halifax and 1 Lancaster. And seeing my Lancaster was lost in that raid, and I was in that Lancaster, and he identified the crew. It was captained by a Captain Adolf Breves, B-R-E-V-E-S, and he is credited with shooting down 1 Lancaster and 2 Halifax, so it had to be his crew that shot down my aeroplane. Anyway, he went further and he gave me the name and address of one of the surviving crew members. The crew survived the war, and this turned out to be a Walter Telsnig, T-E-L-S-N-I-G, who lives in Salzburg.
This is the badge of my squadron, number 1.
I wrote to Walter and explained the situation, gave him all the details that I had.
The eagle is the badge of the Pathfinder Force.
Agreed that it did look like it was his crew that shot us down. A pretty simple meeting with Walter, really, because I knew all about how he operated. I found that all out before, but we did talk about it, but we didn't hammer at each other and go into deep detail or anything like that. But one thing I tried to get out of Walter, I said, how did you feel after that night? I mean, you'd shot down 3 4-engine bombers. I said, if that was me in the same situation, I'd be elated. How did you feel? And he thought as if he was reluctant to say, and in the end he said one word, he said, good.
That's the 2 old airmen when I went to Salzburg to meet with Walter.
Hello, Bill.
Dein Name?
Walter Telsnig. We meet a little bit late, but after we fought against each other.
Wo hast du im Zweiten Weltkrieg gedient? Welche Gattung?
In der Nachtjagd.
Und welches Flugzeug bist du geflogen?
B-110.
Welche Position hattest du in der Mannschaft?
Bordfunk.
Du warst Bordfunk. Und wer war dein Pilot?
Hauptmann Adolf Breves.
Wie war euer Flugzeug bewaffnet?
Also 4 MGs, Normallage, waagerecht. Das waren 2 MGs und 2 Kanonen. Und die Schrägbewaffnung bestand aus 2 senkrecht angeordneten Kanonen, 2 Zentimeter.
Und erinnerst du dich an die Nacht vom 20. auf den 21. Februar 1945, als die RAF die Ölraffinerien von Reisholz in der Nähe von Düsseldorf angegriffen hat?
Jawohl, wir sind sofort nach deren Einflug gestartet.
Ungefähr um wie viel Uhr?
Nach Mitternacht.
Wie hast du erfahren, dass in dem einen Bomber eben Bill Pierce drin war?
Erst nach Briefen von ihm.
Er hat sich sogar mit seiner Tochter in 2008 auf dem Weg nach Salzburg gemacht.
Und hat mich besucht.
Und hat dich besucht. Wie hast du dieses Zusammentreffen empfunden?
Sehr gemütlich. Wir haben uns ausgesprochen. Ich habe ihm erzählt, was ich erlebt habe mit ihm, Und er hat mir erzählt, wie er das erlebt hat. Das Zusammentreffen erlebt hat.
Ja, also durchaus ein positiver
Ja,
Abschluss eines eigentlich negativen ersten Kennenlernens.
absolut.
Und hast du auch noch weiterhin Kontakt zu Bill?
Ja, hin und wieder, er schreibt mir, aber ich bin nicht sehr schreibfleißig.
Es fällt dir inzwischen auch schon sehr schwer zu schreiben.
Ich habe Schwierigkeiten mit meiner Schrift. Ich bin sehr interessiert an seinen Aussagen, weil ich Interesse habe, den Verlauf des Kampfes mitgeschildert zu bekommen.
Aus seiner Sicht, wie er ihn erlebt hat.
Das war
Grüßt du ihn noch?
überhaupt eine seltene Angelegenheit, dass man den Kampf mit dem Gegner von seiner Seite aus geschildert bekommt. Greetings to Australia and return to Europe.
Also, Walter wants you to return to Europe again, Bill.
I still communicate with Walter, and Walter's 3 years older than me. I'm 87, he's 90 odd now, but he still gets around, and well, we're sort of good mates. I can only describe the meeting really in simple terms as two old men meeting for the first time and talking about old times, and that's exactly what it was. I mean, that's about the story briefly.
Yeah, Bill, with the World War II, it was quite a big war, and going back now to World War I, we also had your father involved.
Yeah, my dad was a World War I digger. He went to France with the 1st Australian Machine Gun Company, and he got badly wounded. In his own words, he virtually walked into a shell burst, which blew all the flesh and muscle off his left leg. Didn't take any bone or anything, but it was all scar tissue, and he used to walk, it used to slap. But when World War II arrived, and it looked like I might end up getting called up if I didn't join up, but Pop's idea was that war in Europe can go on as long as it's like no son of mine's going to go through what I went through. And I mean, being under 21, I couldn't say, well, I'm going. Anyhow, I kept pestering him, and a few of my mates that were older, they were joining up, but I never thought of the Air Force. I was thought the Army, and in the end Pop said, you can join the Air Force. I don't know what his motive was, whether he must have thought if something happens there it'll be done over and quick sort of thing. But then that's the reason I joined the Air Force, and it worked out all right. So Pop had the right idea in the long run.
Well, they always know, the parents do, eh?
Oh, he was adamant. I wasn't going to be a soldier, no way.
Mate, back in World War I, which one do you reckon was more the heavier, gruesome one? I think World War I.
World
maybe.
War I was. I mean, in
All
what
those
was
bullets
that
flying.
battle? Yeah, what was that one battle? I just forget. There's been a fair bit in the papers recently where we lost 5,000 Australians in one day. They shot down 97 4-engine bombers.
Wow.
I mean, make it 100 for round figures. That's 100 aircraft, each with 7 men in it.
It's a lot.
100 men and about 7,000 aircraft taken out in one night. But as I say, some of them, nothing happened. It was just like a cross-country exercise.
Yeah.
But the nasty ones, they stirred you up a bit, yeah.
Well, mate, it's a pleasure talking to you.
Yep.
And guys, I hope you really enjoyed that exceptional story from our great Australian, Mr. Bill Pearce.
Ordinary Australian.
Thanks, guys.
Woo.